Blood is thicker than water, but it's also the perfect camouflage for leeches. My parents swore I was the family's biggest mistake, an embarrassment to our name. 10 years later, they were sitting in my glass-walled boardroom, sobbing, begging for a job. Here is exactly how I broke them. If you looked at the Harper family Christmas cards from the late 2000s, you would see the picture of suburban aristocratic perfection. My father, Richard Harper, was a senior partner at a prestigious corporate law firm in Boston. My mother, Margaret, was a charity gala socialite whose full-time job was maintaining the illusion that our family was flawless. And then there was my older brother, Tristan. Tristan was the golden boy. He had the perfect jawline, the effortless charm, and an uncanny ability to fail upward. He was handed a brand new BMW on his 16th birthday, despite having a suspended learner's permit. When he almost flunked out of his private prep school, my father made a strategic donation to the athletic department to ensure his graduation. I, on the other hand, was the invisible child. I wasn't rebellious or troublesome, I was just entirely unimpressive to them. I was quiet, deeply obsessed with systems and numbers, and had zero interest in wearing the pastel country club dresses my mother bought me. In their eyes, I was a social liability. The blatant favoritism wasn't even hidden. I vividly remember my high school graduation. Tristan, who was home for the summer after getting academically probed at his fraternity-heavy college, was gifted a vintage Rolex just for surviving sophomore year. I received a copy of a self-help book on etiquette and a polite handshake from my father. "Don't worry, Chloe," my mother told me that evening, sipping her gin and tonic. "Not everyone is built for greatness. You're practical. You'll find a nice middle management job, marry a CPA, and live a quiet life. There's no shame in mediocrity." Those words became the fuel that would eventually burn their world to the ground. I went to a state college because my parents refused to pay for a top-tier business school for me, claiming it was a waste of capital. I worked 3 jobs: barista at 5 a.m., library desk attendant in the afternoons, and data entry clerk on weekends just to cover rent and tuition. While I was surviving on ramen and instant coffee, Tristan was racking up $10,000 credit card bills on my father's platinum account in Ibiza. By the time I was 23, I had developed a comprehensive business plan for a B2B logistics software platform. I had noticed a massive inefficiency in how mid-sized manufacturing companies tracked their supply chains, and I knew how to fix it. I just needed $15,000 in seed capital to build the minimum viable product. I made the fatal mistake of bringing my pitch deck to Thanksgiving dinner. I waited until the dessert plates were cleared. I had practiced my pitch in the mirror for weeks. I handed a neatly bound folder to my father. I explained the market gap, my projected revenue, and asked for a $15,000 loan. I even drafted a promissory note with an 8% interest rate. My father didn't even open the folder. He glanced at the title, Veritas Supply Solutions, and chuckled. A deep, patronizing laugh that made my stomach drop. "Chloe, sweetheart," Richard said, sliding the folder back to me across the mahogany table. "You don't know the first thing about the real corporate world. This is a cute little project, but business is a blood sport. You don't have the teeth for it. I'm not throwing 15 grand into a pipe dream. It's not a pipe dream, Dad. I have letters of intent from 3 local. Enough," he snapped, his voice turning cold. "I work too hard to fund your delusions." At that exact moment, Tristan walked into the dining room. "Hey, Dad," he said casually, completely oblivious to the tension. "I was looking at that condo downtown. The one with the rooftop pool. The down payment is about 150 grand. We're still good for that?" "Of course, son," my father beamed, his entire demeanor changing. "My financial advisor will wire the funds to escrow on Monday." I sat there frozen. $150,000 for a luxury condo for a son who had never held a job for more than 3 months. But $15,000 for a meticulously researched business loan was a delusion. "You're making a mistake," I said, my voice trembling but surprisingly firm. Margaret slammed her wineglass down. Chloe. Stop being so dramatic and jealous of your brother. He has a future to build, and I don't, I asked, looking directly into my mother's eyes. Let's be honest, my father sneered. You'll never succeed at this. You're just not built for it. Go back to your data entry job and leave the real money to the men. I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. The absolute clarity of that moment was chilling. I picked up my pitch deck, walked the hallway, grabbed my coat, and left. I blocked their numbers that night. I didn't speak to them again for nearly a decade. If anyone tells you that building a business out of spite is a glamorous montage of fast cars and power suits, they are lying. Building a business out of spite looks like sleeping on the floor of a 400-square-foot studio apartment in Chicago, eating canned beans and crying in the shower because your bank account is overdrawn by $12. I started Veritas Logistics with absolutely nothing. I took out a predatory personal loan just to hire a freelance developer in Eastern Europe to build my prototype. For the first 2 years, I was the CEO, the janitor, the sales team, and the customer support hotline. I cold called 150 companies a day. I was hung up on, laughed at, and ignored. Every time I felt like quitting, I would hear my father's voice, "You'll never succeed." It was a toxic motivation, but it kept my eyes open at 3 a.m. Eventually, the relentless grinding paid off. A mid-sized auto parts manufacturer agreed to beta test my software. It saved them 14% in supply chain wastage in the first quarter. Word spread. By year 3, Veritas had 10 paying enterprise clients. I was finally making payroll, but the growth was too fast. I was drowning in the operational demands and desperately needed a partner to help scale. Enter Liam Brooks. Liam was sharp, charismatic, and had a resume dripping with Silicon Valley prestige. We met at a supply chain networking conference, and he immediately saw the potential in Veritas. He bought into the vision, and more importantly, he brought a massive network of venture capital connections. I brought him on as Chief Operating Officer and gave him 20% equity. For a while, Liam was the brother I never had. He handled the aggressive VC pitches, freeing me up to focus on product development and client retention. We secured a $5 million Series A funding round. We moved into a sleek office space. My net worth on paper suddenly had 7 digits. I thought I had finally won. I thought I had built my safe haven. But I had underestimated the sheer greed of the corporate world. In year 5, we were in talks with a massive global retailer. Call them Omnicorp. Landing Omnicorp would push our valuation past the $50 million mark. It was the white whale. But during the negotiations, I started noticing strange discrepancies. Liam was taking private meetings with Arthur Pendleton, the lead executive at Omnicorp. Liam told me they were just ironing out technical integrations, but his calendar was suspiciously blocked out. One evening, Liam left his laptop open on his desk. I wasn't usually the snooping type, but my gut was screaming at me. A notification popped up on his screen from a private legal firm, draft agreement, Veritas acquisition. My heart stopped. I opened the email thread. Liam wasn't trying to land Omnicorp as a client. He was orchestrating a hostile buyout. He had convinced Omnicorp that I was an unstable, emotional founder who couldn't handle the pressure of an enterprise contract. His plan was to have Omnicorp buy Veritas for a heavily undervalued sum, oust me from the board, and install himself as the new CEO under the Omnicorp umbrella. He was going to steal my empire out from under me. The betrayal felt like a physical blow to the chest. It felt exactly like that Thanksgiving dinner being discarded and undermined by a man I trusted, deemed too weak to sit at the head of the table. But Chloe Harper at 28 was not the same girl who walked out of her parents' house at 23. I didn't cry, I went to war. I didn't confront Liam immediately. Instead, I spent the next 72 hours working with my own private legal counsel. When I drafted Liam's employment contract and the operating agreement years ago, I had slipped in a highly specific airtight breach of fiduciary duty clause. If an executive officer was found actively negotiating against the company's valuation without board approval, their equity would be immediately clawed back at the original strike price, which for Liam was essentially zero. I gathered all the digital evidence. The emails, the DocuSign logs, the texts. On a Tuesday morning, Liam walked into our boardroom expecting a routine status update. Instead, he found me sitting at the head of the table with our lead corporate attorney and a private security guard standing by the door. "Morning, Liam," I said, sliding a thick manila folder across the table. "Sound familiar? I'll keep this brief. You're fired. You have 10 minutes to clear out your desk. Your equity is forfeit under Section 4B of the operating agreement. And if you ever contact Omnicorp again, I will personally bury you in so much litigation your grandchildren will be paying my legal fees." He turned pale. He tried to argue, tried to threaten me, but the paperwork was bulletproof. He had gotten greedy and sloppy. I watched him carry a cardboard box out of the building, feeling a ruthless, cold satisfaction. I stepped back into the CEO row with absolute authority. I flew out to Omnicorp's headquarters the next day, met with Arthur Pendleton myself, exposed Liam's duplicity, and closed the software contract on my terms. Veritas Logistics exploded. Within 18 months, we hit $50 million in annual recurring revenue. I was featured on the cover of a major national business magazine under the headline, "The Supply Chain Queen Rewriting the Rules." I was sitting in my corner office looking out over the Chicago skyline, feeling invincible. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text message from a number I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. "Chloe, it's Mom. We saw the magazine. We need to talk. Please, it's an emergency." Karma was finally coming to collect its debts, and I was more than ready to watch them pay. 10 years of silence is a heavy thing to break. 10 years of pretending I didn't have a family, only to have a single, desperate text message shatter the quiet sanctuary I had built for myself. "Chloe, it's Mom. We saw the magazine. We need to talk. Please, it's an emergency." I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. A younger, weaker version of me might have felt a flutter of hope and naive belief that seeing my face on the cover of Forbes had finally made them realize my worth. But the woman sitting in the CEO chair of a $50 million empire knew better. The operative word in her text wasn't "please." It was emergency. I didn't reply for 2 days. Let them sweat, I thought. Let them feel a fraction of the anxiety I felt sleeping on that studio apartment floor. Finally, I instructed my executive assistant Sarah to book a private dining room at the Capitol Grill downtown and send them the itinerary. I wouldn't go to Boston. If they wanted my time, they were coming to my territory. When I walked into the private room that Friday evening, my breath caught in my throat for a fraction of a second. I had expected the imperious, polished titans of Boston high society who had discarded me a decade ago. Instead, I found 2 aging, visibly trembling strangers. My father, Richard, who used to wear bespoke Italian suits like a second skin, was swimming in an ill-fitting blazer. His hair was stark white and thinning, and the arrogant set of his jaw had completely collapsed. My mother, Margaret, looked even worse. A signature string of pearls was missing, replaced by a cheap scarf, and she clutched her leather handbag with white-knuckled desperation. "Chloe!" my mother gasped, standing up so fast she nearly knocked over her water glass. She reached out to hug me. I took a deliberate step back, holding up a hand. "Let's skip the theatrics, Margaret. Sit down." She flinched at the use of her first name, her eyes welling with tears, but she obeyed. My father couldn't even look me in the eye. He stared at the mahogany table, looking utterly defeated. I took my seat at the head of the table, poured myself a glass of sparkling water, and looked at them. "You have 30 minutes. Make it count." My father cleared his throat, the sound dry and hollow. You've done incredibly well for yourself, Chloe. We read the article, Veritas. It's brilliant. We always knew you were smart. Stop. I cut him off, my voice perfectly level. If you try to rewrite history, I will walk out that door right now and you will never see me again. You didn't believe in me. You told me I was built for mediocrity. You told me business was a blood sport and I didn't have the teeth for it. So let's treat this like a business meeting. What is the crisis? Margaret broke down sobbing. It's your brother. It's Tristan. Now, of course it was. The golden boy. The epicenter of the Harper universe. Over the next 20 minutes, the ugly, pathetic truth spilled out. Tristan hadn't just failed at finding a job. He had actively pursued ruination. 5 years ago, he had partnered with a smooth-talking college buddy named Harrison Cole to launch a luxury real estate investment fund in Miami. It was pitched as an exclusive syndicate for high-net-worth individuals to flip commercial waterfront properties. In reality, it was a textbook Ponzi scheme. Tristan and Harrison weren't buying properties. They were using new investor capital to pay off early investors, while siphoning millions into offshore accounts to fund their lavish lifestyles, yachts, private jets, week-long benders in Monaco. When the market cooled off, the investors wanted their returns, my father whispered, his hands shaking. The SEC started sniffing around. Tristan panicked. He came to me. And you bailed him out, I stated flatly. It wasn't a question. He was facing 20 years in federal prison, Chloe. My mother wailed. What were we supposed to do? Let him face the consequences of committing federal fraud, I suggested coldly. But go on, Richard. How did you bail him out? A partner at a corporate law firm makes good money but not cover up a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme money. My father finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot and terrified. I borrowed it. From where? Silence stretched across the room, heavy and suffocating. From the firm's escrow accounts, he choked out, the admission destroying the last shred of his dignity. I diverted client settlement funds. I thought I could cover it up, hide the paper trail just long enough to liquidate some of Tristan's remaining assets and put the money back. But the managing partners ordered a random internal audit. I sat back in my chair, absolutely stunned. Richard Hopper, the self-righteous, law-abiding aristocrat, had embezzled millions to save his worthless son. They found out, I deduced. They gave me a choice, he said, his voice breaking. Surrender my law license quietly, resign immediately, and pay back every single cent with interest within 60 days, or they would hand me over to the FBI alongside Tristan. To save himself and his son, my parents had liquidated everything. Their retirement funds, their stock portfolios, the summer house in Nantucket. But it wasn't enough. They were currently $2.5 million short. Tristan was out on bail, Harrison Cole had fled the country, and the bank had initiated foreclosure proceedings on my parents' primary estate in Boston. They were 3 weeks away from being homeless, and Tristan was staring down a decade behind bars. We have nowhere else to turn, Chloe, Margaret pleaded, reaching across the table to grab my wrist. Her hands were freezing. We are begging you. You have the money now. The magazine said your company is worth $50 million. A loan of $2.5 million is a drop in the bucket for you. Please save your family. I looked at her hand, clutching mine. I thought about the $15,000 loan I had begged for. I thought about the 400-square-foot apartment. I thought about the nights I cried myself to sleep because I was so terrified of failing. I gently pulled my arm out of her grasp. You want $2.5 million, I said slowly. Just as a loan, my father interjected desperately. I can consult, I can. First, you're a disbarred lawyer pushing 70 who just admitted to embezzlement, Richard. You are unemployable. I stood up and buttoned my blazer. I will consider your proposal. Come to my office on Monday at 9 a.m. Sarah will validate your parking. Without another word, I walked out of the private dining room, leaving them sitting in the wreckage of their own making. I spent the entire weekend with my CFO and my personal legal counsel. When Monday morning arrived, I was ready. My parents stepped off the private elevator into the penthouse suite of Veritas Logistics. They looked completely out of place in the sleek, ultra-modern lobby bustling with young, hungry tech professionals. Sarah escorted them into my glass-walled boardroom, the same boardroom where I had decapitated my former COO. It was a room designed for executions. I walked in precisely at 9:05 a.m. They were sitting close together, looking fragile and expectant. They honestly believed that because we shared the same last name, I was going to write them a check. They still didn't understand who I had become. I dropped a neatly bound folder onto the table. It wasn't new, it was frayed at the edges and yellowed with age. My father stared at it. "What is this?" "This," I said, leaning over the table, "is the Veritas Supply Solutions pitch deck from Thanksgiving 2016. The one you refused to open. The one you called a delusion before writing a check for your son's luxury condo." My mother squeezed her eyes shut. "Chloe, please, we are so sorry. I told you, Margaret, no theatrics. We are conducting business." I sat down. "Let's review the facts. You need $2.5 million to pay off the firm and stop the foreclosure on your house. If you don't pay the firm, Richard goes to prison. If you don't pay the bank, you live on the street." "Yes," my father whispered. "Here is my counteroffer," I said, sliding a fresh, thick stack of legal documents toward them. "Read carefully." My father put on his reading glasses with trembling hands. As his eyes scanned the first page, the little color left in his face drained away completely. You bought our debt?" he gasped. "I did," I replied calmly. "Over the weekend, my holding company purchased the foreclosure rights to your Boston estate from the bank at a premium. I also settled the $2.5 million restitution directly with your former law firm. In exchange, the firm signed over the promissory notes to me." My mother let out a loud sob of relief. "Oh, thank God. Thank God, Chloe, you saved us." "I haven't saved you, Margaret. I own you." The silence in the boardroom was absolute. You could hear the distant hum of the city traffic 20 stories below. "You owe me the $2.5 million plus the mortgage balance," I explained, my voice devoid of any emotion. "And unlike the bank, I am not a patient lender. Tristan gets nothing. Not a single red cent of my money is going to his criminal defense. He committed fraud, he funded a Ponzi scheme, and he will face a jury of his peers. Let him rot in a federal cell." "Mike, you can't do that to your brother." Margaret screamed, slamming her hands on the table. "He is not my brother," I snapped, the ice in my voice freezing her in place. "He is a parasite, and if you try to funnel $1 of my money to his legal team, I will foreclose on your house in 24 hours and have you physically removed by the sheriff." "Chloe, be reasonable," my father begged, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. "How are we supposed to pay you back? We have no income. We have nothing." "I know," I smiled. A cold, sharp smile. "Which is why I brought you here today. I'm offering you jobs." I slid 2 employment contracts across the table. "Margaret, you will be joining our Tier 1 customer support team. You will work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. fielding angry calls from truck drivers and warehouse managers about delayed shipments. You will earn $18 an hour." Her jaw dropped. "Customer support? Me? I was on the board of the Boston Symphony." "Not anymore." "And Richard," I turned to my father, who was staring at the contract as if it were a venomous snake. "He will be a junior data entry clerk in our compliance department. He will verify digital shipping manifests against physical receipts. It is tedious, mindless work. You will earn $20 an hour. Both of your salaries will be heavily garnished to pay rent on the house that I now own, allowing you to continue living there without starving to death." My father looked at me, completely broken. "You want to humiliate us. You want us to spend the rest of our lives as your indentured servants." "No, Richard." I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. "I'm just taking your advice. You told me 10 years ago that some people aren't built for greatness. You told me to find a nice middle management job and live a quiet life, because there's no shame in mediocrity. I'm just putting you in the roles you are clearly built for. My parents sat in my glass-walled boardroom sobbing uncontrollably. The titans of Boston society utterly reduced to rubble. They had spent their entire lives worshipping the golden child who had destroyed them, and discarding the daughter who was now their only lifeline. You have 5 minutes to sign those contracts, I said, checking my watch, or I call security to escort you off my property, and the eviction notices will be posted on your door by tomorrow morning. The choice is yours. They signed. Their hands shook so badly that their signatures were barely legible, but they signed. Karma didn't just come knocking, it kicked the door off its hinges. Tristan was sentenced to 8 years in a medium-security federal prison. He writes to me sometimes begging for commissary money. I return the letters unopened. My parents still live in that massive, echoing house in Boston, working remote, entry-level jobs for my company, answering to managers 40 years their junior. I didn't build my empire out of love, and I certainly didn't build it to save the family that threw me away. I built it out of pure, unfiltered resilience, and sometimes the sweetest victory isn't just proving your doubters wrong, it's becoming the absolute master of their fate. Blood might be thicker than water, but loyalty is proven by actions, not genetics. Never let anyone dictate your worth, especially those who demand your submission to feed their own egos. If my journey from the discarded daughter to a self-made CEO resonated with you, smash that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their power, and subscribe to the channel for more true stories of resilience, revenge, and rising to the top.